My fiancée and her family mocked my dead father at dinner, so I ended the engagement instantly and left them with a lesson they'll never forget. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and my dad was the kind of man you spend your whole life trying to live up to. Even now, 3 years after losing him, I still hear his voice in small moments. When I open a door for someone, when I stand up for myself, when I fight the urge to accept disrespect just to keep the peace. He wasn't rich, he wasn't flashy, but he was dignified in a way that made people straighten their backs around him. He taught me how to work, how to stay grounded, and more than anything, how to carry myself without ever stepping on someone else to feel tall. I think that's why losing him still feels like a wound that hasn't fully healed. Grief isn't loud anymore, it's quiet, like a bruise under the skin I never stopped noticing. Olivia came into my life a year after he passed. She was warm, affectionate, and the kind of woman who made it easy to imagine a future without feeling guilty for moving forward. In the beginning, she would ask about my dad with genuine interest, where he worked, what he was like, how he handled things. I would tell her stories about his strange laugh, the way he'd hum old songs while fixing things, and how he'd always say, "Dignity isn't something you show, it's something you live." She'd smile and squeeze my hand like she understood. But as our relationship got more serious, something shifted. Not with us, exactly, but around us. Olivia's family had a different energy. They were polished, wealthy, image-driven. I didn't judge them for it, but I could feel the difference every time they asked what I did or what neighborhood I lived in. Last week, Olivia sat beside me on the couch, playing with my fingers like she does when she's nervous. "My parents want us to come over for a formal dinner," she said softly. "It's important for our future." The way she said it made something in my chest tighten, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner was going to change something. I pulled up to Olivia's parents' house the following Saturday, and the first thing that hit me was the silence. The kind of quiet you only hear in neighborhoods where the grass is trimmed by professionals and the houses all look like they're posing for real estate magazines. Their place was huge, stone-fronted, spotless. It didn't feel lived in, it felt displayed. Olivia squeezed my arm as we walked up the steps. "Just be yourself, okay?" she whispered. I nodded, but the way she said it felt more like a warning than reassurance. When her mother opened the door, I understood why. She looked me up and down with a smile so tight it could have been painted on. "Oh, you're taller than I expected," she said, as if that were somehow a flaw. Her father shook my hand with the grip of someone trying to measure my worth in a single squeeze. Inside, everything smelled faintly of expensive candles and polished wood. The air felt stiff, controlled. Even the family photos were arranged perfectly. No goofy moments, no warmth. Just poses. As we sat in the living room, her father leaned forward. "So, tell us about your background," he said, dragging the last word out. Olivia stiffened beside me, but stayed silent. I kept my voice even. "I grew up in a small suburb. My dad worked construction most of his life." Her mother tilted her head. "Oh, a labor job. That must have been tough." It wasn't the words. It was the tone. Like she was examining a stain she couldn't quite scrub out. I tried to redirect the conversation, mentioning how hard my dad worked, how respected he was in our community. But her father cut in with, "Work ethic is admirable, but success, well, that's a different category entirely." Olivia looked away, and for the first time that night, I felt something in the room shift. Subtle, but unmistakable. A quiet, creeping sense that this dinner wasn't about getting to know me. It was about evaluating me. Dinner hadn't even started yet, but the tension in that living room felt heavier than the chandelier hanging above us. Olivia kept smoothing the fabric of her dress, something she only did when she was anxious. I wanted to reach for her hand, but her parents' eyes were on me like I was already failing some exam they hadn't bothered to explain. When we finally moved to the dining table, her father sat at the head like a judge. Her mother floated beside him, perfectly composed. And then her older brother, Ethan, walked in with a smirk that told me everything I needed to know about him. "So," Ethan said as he took a seat, "Liv tells us your dad was, what, a construction guy?" He said it like he was guessing a flavor of cheap ice cream. I swallowed. "Yeah, he worked hard his whole life. Taught me everything I know about strength." Ethan grinned. "Physical strength, I assume?" Olivia muttered, "Ethan, stop," under her breath, but he ignored her. Her mother chimed in with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. "It's sweet, really. Some people grow up with simple role models. It builds character." I felt my jaw tighten. My dad wasn't simple. He was respected. People trusted him. Her father raised a brow. Respected? Or just well liked? There's a difference. That's when I made my mistake. I tried to defend my dad with a story. I told them about how he used to fix neighbors' roofs for free when storms hit, how he stayed late on work sites to help younger workers learn the trade. But her mother just gave that same thin smile. Oh, community things. Very salt of the earth. The words were harmless on paper, but the delivery felt like a slap. They weren't insulting my father's career. They were mocking who he was. Olivia kept her eyes down, her silence growing louder with every second. And then Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking again. You know, I heard a funny thing about your dad once. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence was the beginning of everything unraveling. Ethan's funny thing hung in the air like a bad smell, and suddenly even the clinking of silverware stopped. I felt every muscle in my body tense, but I forced my voice to stay calm. What funny thing? I asked. Ethan shrugged casually, swirling his wine, as if he were about to tell a harmless joke. Oh, just something about how guys like your dad always get too attached to their jobs. You know, living paycheck to paycheck, taking pride in scraps. Olivia whispered sharply, Ethan, enough. But her mother chuckled instead. It's not an insult, dear, she said. It's just charming. Many people with limited means become very sentimental about routine life. It's how they cope. My stomach twisted. I stared at my plate, gripping the fork so hard my knuckles whitened. My dad didn't cope, I said quietly. He lived with dignity. Her father leaned back, amusement flickering in his eyes. Dignity is subjective. Success, however, isn't. Surely you understand the difference. It was like they were dissecting my father, reducing him to some stereotype they used to entertain themselves. But what cut deeper was Olivia's silence. She kept blinking, kept forcing tiny smiles meant to smooth things over, but she didn't stand up. She didn't defend me. She didn't defend him. When dinner finally arrived, the scent of roasted meat filled the room, but it might as well have been smoke. I could barely breathe. Every time I lifted my fork, someone added a new comment. Ethan, so, Liv says you get emotional about your dad a lot. Her mother, grief is natural, but some men never quite grow out of it. Her father, parents influence ambition. Hopefully you didn't inherit his limitations. I heard their voices, but all I could picture was my dad, standing in his old boots, calling me kiddo, wiping sweat from his brow, laughing after long days. They were laughing at that man, mocking that heart. And then Ethan cleared his throat dramatically, eyes glinting. Actually, he said, leaning in, there's a story I heard recently about your father. Want to know? My pulse spiked. This was no longer disrespect. This was an attack. Ethan leaned forward like he'd been waiting all night to deliver this moment, his elbows on the table, his grin sharp enough to cut skin. It's actually hilarious, he said. A friend of mine works in the same area your dad used to. He told me your old man was always borrowing tools because he couldn't afford his own. Classic, right? My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate with a hollow clang. Olivia gasped quietly, but once again, she didn't speak. I swallowed, forcing the words out through tightening lungs. That's not true. My dad owned everything he needed. Ethan shrugged, unfazed. Hey, maybe he pawned them or something. Struggling families do that sometimes. Her mother laughed, an airy, dismissive laugh that made my skin prickle. Oh, Ethan, stop. You're going to embarrass him. Her father smirked. If that's even possible. The room spun for a second, not because of the insult, but because they were laughing. Laughing about a man they had never met. A man whose name they didn't deserve to speak. I felt heat rising up my neck, the kind that comes right before something breaks. My dad worked harder than any man you know, I said. He earned every bit of respect he had. Ethan raised his glass in a mock toast. Sure, respect among the lower income crowd must have been incredible. Olivia finally touched my arm. Please, she whispered. Just ignore him. This is how my family jokes. Jokes. That word nearly sent the last of my restraint slipping. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disgusted. She was embarrassed. By me. Ethan didn't stop. Anyway, he continued, leaning back smugly. My buddy also said your dad once got turned down for a promotion because, his words, not mine, He didn't know how to talk to real professionals. He laughed, and something in me went cold. Her father tapped his spoon on his glass. Well, he said, since we're being honest, I have a final question about your father. My breath stalled. This was the moment things would cross a line I couldn't uncross. Her father set his spoon down with the kind of deliberate calm people use when they're about to say something cruel and want the whole room to hear it. Tell me, he began, folding his hands. Do you plan to be like your father? You know, financially limited, emotionally fragile, always trying to do your best instead of actually succeeding. For a moment, my ears rang. It felt like someone had grabbed my chest and squeezed until the air wouldn't go in. I turned to Olivia, begging silently for support, for something, anything. But she stared at her plate, jaw clenched, refusing to meet my eyes. Did you tell them that? I whispered. Her mother laughed lightly. Oh, she told us plenty. She said you grew up poor, said losing your father left you a bit. How did she put it, dear? She turned to Olivia with a sweet, venomous smile. Yes. Emotionally heavy. Olivia finally spoke, her voice barely audible. They asked. I just told them the truth. The truth? I repeated, my voice cracking. You told them my grief makes me weak? She looked away again. Ethan burst out laughing. Man, this is gold. Liv said you cried once when his name came up, over a dead construction worker? Come on. My pulse throbbed in my temples. My heart felt like it had dropped, somewhere under the table. Then her father added the final blow. We just want to make sure you won't drag Olivia down. Generational struggles tend to repeat. And frankly, we don't want our future grandkids growing up with, well, that kind of influence. That kind of influence. My father, my hero, reduced to a warning label. I pushed my chair back just enough for the legs to scrape loudly against the floor. All eyes snapped toward me, but none with fear. Only curiosity, like they were waiting to see how the emotional one would react. And then, Ethan smirked at me, raising his glass. By the way, if you two have a son, we should totally name him after your dad. Imagine saying it every day for a laugh. The room erupted in chuckles. But I wasn't laughing. Something inside me finally snapped. I didn't realize I was standing until the chair scraped fully away from the table. The sound cut through their laughter like a blade, but not one of them looked ashamed. Not one flinched. They just stared, waiting for the poor, emotional fiancé to put on a show. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from restraint. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Relax, man. We're just having fun. Fun? My voice came out lower than I expected. Rough, like it had been dragged across gravel. Mocking my father is fun to you? Her mother sighed dramatically. Oh, don't be sensitive. It's just dinner talk. Olivia finally spoke. Please, sit down, she whispered. You're making this awkward. That sentence hit harder than anything her family had said. You're making this awkward, not them, not the people dissecting my dead father. Me. I stared at her, searching for the woman who used to ask about my dad with genuine warmth. The woman who said she admired how close we were. The woman who held me the night I cried on the anniversary of his death. But she wasn't here. In her place was someone afraid of losing face, afraid of upsetting her family, afraid of standing beside me. Her father cleared his throat. If you're done with the theatrics, I'd like to finish my dinner. The world slowed around me. The clinking utensils, the soft hum of the thermostat, the faint smell of rosemary from the roast. But inside me, something was collapsing. Quietly, painfully. I remembered my dad's voice. Never let anyone take your dignity, kiddo. Not even someone you love. My throat tightened, and for the first time, I realized love wasn't what was sitting across from me. It was something else, something conditional, shallow, fragile. I took a breath, steadying myself. Olivia, I said softly. Look at me. She did, hesitantly, nervously, almost like she already knew what was coming. My next words were going to shatter the evening, and nothing about us would ever be the same after it. When Olivia finally lifted her eyes to mine, there was fear in them. Not fear of losing me, but fear of what her family would think if I didn't play along. That realization settled inside me like ice. I reached into my pocket slowly, deliberately. Her family watched with the kind of anticipation people have when they expect a performance. Ethan even leaned forward, smirking. What now? He whispered. I placed the engagement ring, her engagement ring, on the table in front of her. The metal clicked softly against the polished wood, but the sound echoed through the room like a thunderclap. Olivia's breath caught. What are you doing?" she whispered. I kept my voice calm, too calm. "I'm ending this engagement." Her mother gasped, offended rather than shocked. Her father's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" Ethan burst into laughter. "No way. Over a joke? You're kidding, right?" I shook my head. "You humiliated me. You mocked the only parent I had left. And worse." I looked at Olivia, my voice breaking just slightly. "You let them." Olivia reached for my hand, panicked. Please don't do this. They were just teasing. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I repeated. "Olivia, they made fun of my father. They made fun of his death. And you sat there in silence." Her father slammed his palm on the table. "You will not blame my daughter for your inability to handle humor." Humor. That word again. They kept dressing their cruelty up like something harmless. I stepped back from the table, watching Olivia's face crumble. "I loved you," I said quietly, "but I can't marry into a family that thinks dignity is a joke." She shook her head frantically. "Let's talk outside. Please, let's just—" "No," I said firmly. "There's nothing left to talk about." I turned to walk toward the door, feeling their eyes burning into my back. But before I reached it, her father's voice cut through the silence. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." I paused, hand hovering near the doorknob, and a cold clarity washed over me. I didn't turn around at first. I just stood there, staring at the doorknob, feeling the heat of their entitlement prickling my back. The biggest mistake of my life. That's what her father said, like he had any authority to define my future, or my worth. Slowly, I turned. They were all staring. Olivia with wide, trembling eyes. Her mother stiff with indignation. Ethan grinning like this was the best entertainment he'd seen all year. And her father sitting tall, arms crossed, satisfied with his own importance. I walked back toward the table, not to stay, but to speak the truth they needed to hear. "You think you know something about success," I said quietly. "About dignity, about being better than other people. But let me tell you something about my father." Her father scoffed. "Oh, here we go." "No," I snapped sharply, making him flinch. "You're going to listen." The room fell, silent. I felt my throat tighten, but I pushed through it. My dad worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. He never complained. He never treated anyone like they were beneath him. He fixed roofs for free when storms hit. He bought groceries for neighbors who couldn't afford it. He was the kind of man whose handshake meant more than your entire bank account. Ethan rolled his eyes. Touching. I kept going. He taught me what dignity actually is, living with your feet on the ground and your heart intact. He taught me to respect people, to protect the people I love, to never bow to arrogance. Her mother muttered, "Is this supposed to impress us?" I ignored her. "Olivia," I said, turning to her, "you told them my grief makes me weak, that losing him was baggage, that I cry too easily when he's mentioned." Her face crumpled. I didn't mean—" "You told them everything personal about me," I continued, "but you never told them the most important part." She swallowed. "What's that?" "That he was the best man I've ever known." Her father scoffed loudly. "And yet he died broke. What a legacy." That's when something inside me, whatever patience I had left, collapsed completely. I stepped forward, staring him down, and for the first time all night, he looked uneasy. I don't know what my face looked like in that moment, but whatever it was, it made her father lean back in his chair. The confidence in his eyes flickered, not gone, but shaken. For the first time, he wasn't sure he owned the room. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't cursing. But something inside me had cracked open, and everything I'd been holding together came pouring out. "You think money's the only measure of a man," I said. "But here's the thing. You could stack every dollar you have, build a tower all the way to the ceiling, and you still wouldn't reach half the height of the man my father was." Her mother scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Don't create a scene." "A scene?" I laughed bitterly. "This was your scene. You scripted every line. And Olivia—" I turned toward her. "You stood by and let them humiliate me." Her lips trembled, eyes glassy. "I didn't think they'd go that far." "You didn't think they'd go that far because you've always let them go that far," I said. You let them steer your relationships, your decisions, even your dignity. Ethan groaned. God, man, you're so dramatic. That's when the weight of everything hit me at once. My father's empty chair at holidays. His laugh I'd never hear again. Every memory I was trying to protect from being twisted by strangers who never cared. The pressure behind my ribs tightened until I couldn't breathe. I grabbed the edge of the table, steadying myself. Olivia whispered, "Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly. "No, I'm not." And then I did something I never expected. I walked out of the dining room without another word, down the hallway, out the front door, into the cold air that slapped against my skin like reality itself. I didn't make it 3 steps before my chest caved in. I pressed my fists against my eyes, trying to stop the shaking, but it was pointless. For the first time in years, I broke, completely, alone, outside a house full of people who were supposed to become my family. And the worst part? I didn't know if I'd ever recover from what happened inside that room. I don't know how long I stood outside that house, just breathing in cold air that tasted like metal and disappointment. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My throat burned from holding back the kind of grief that doesn't make noise, the kind that sits behind your ribs like a stone you can't dislodge. I kept hearing my dad's laugh, his voice, the way he'd clap my shoulder and say, "You're stronger than you think, kiddo." But in that moment, I didn't feel strong. I felt destroyed. My phone buzzed, once, then again, then over and over. "Olivia." I ignored the first few messages, but eventually I looked. "Please come back. We can talk about this. You embarrass me. I'm sorry. My parents didn't mean it. Please just come home with me. Home." The word hit me wrong. There was no home with someone who let me be torn apart like that. A new notification came, this time an email from her parents' address. I opened it, expecting an apology. Instead, I read, "Tonight was meant to test your resilience. We push people to see if they can handle the expectations of our family. Your reaction was concerning, but we are still open to smoothing things over if you reflect on your emotional triggers. Resilience, test, expectations. Reflect on your emotional triggers." I laughed. An ugly, broken sound. They hadn't humiliated me by accident. They had planned it. And Olivia, she had played a part, whether she wanted to or not. Another buzz, a voice memo from Olivia. I hesitated before listening, but when I pressed play, it wasn't her crying or apologizing. It was her whispering, her voice shaky. "They won't let this go unless you apologize. Please, please just say sorry so we can move on. I can't fight them." That sentence, it ended whatever hope I had left. She couldn't fight them, and she'd never fight for me. I stared at the screen, the cold air stinging my eyes, and I realized exactly what I needed to do next. But doing it would change everything. I stood there on the sidewalk, my phone still glowing in my hand, her voice memo replaying in my head like a haunting refrain. "Please, just say sorry. I can't fight them." It was strange. After everything that had happened inside that house, after every insult thrown like a dagger at the memory of the man who raised me, it was that sentence that finally cleared the fog. I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was leaving a future where I'd never be respected. A future where my father's name would always be a punchline. A future where love had conditions attached to someone else's approval. I opened a new message, not to her, but to her entire family. I kept it simple, honest. "My father taught me dignity, responsibility, and strength. Tonight made it clear I won't find any of those things in your household. I won't apologize for defending the man who made me who I am. Olivia, I hope you find the courage to stand for something someday, but I won't be around to watch." I hit send, blocked them all, delete, delete, delete. Then I drove, with no destination, no plan, just instinct. I ended up at the old park where Dad used to take me after long shifts. The benches were worn, the air smelled faintly of pine, and for the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe. I sat down and just let everything out. Quiet tears, deep breaths, memories flooding in. I spoke out loud, like my father was sitting beside me. "You were right," I whispered. "Dignity isn't something you show. It's something you live." The wind rustled through the trees like an answer. In the months that followed, I didn't look back. I poured myself into my work, my friendships, my own growth. I even started volunteering at the community center Dad once loved. teaching kids the same lessons he taught me. One afternoon, a friend mentioned he'd heard that Olivia's family still talks about me, the guy who walked out without hesitation. Good. Let them remember me that way. Because in a house full of people who measured worth by money, image, and ego, I was the only one who walked away with dignity intact.